if you look at the world, it seems like we're more interconnected than ever before.
Absolutely.
And there's things you can point to, like maybe social media has actually made us more fundamentally distant from one another, and maybe this closeness is farcical. But still, I can take a plane, and in 8 hours, I can be in a different continent.
Yeah.
And I can talk to someone from across the world that I couldn't have talked to before. So in that way, I think we're more interconnected, and I can't foresee that just suddenly like not being the case anymore.
Definitely, yeah.
Even with like restrictions on the internet or restrictions on flying like we had during COVID.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to episode 7 of the Discourse Debrief. I'm Logan.
I'm AJ.
Blossom.
I am Robert.
So this is Robert's topic today, but before we get into it, we have just a couple announcements, I suppose. I think for you guys, by the time this goes up, there'll be 1 week before our Regions competition in NAU at Flagstaff. That will be the weekend of April 12th. All 4 of us will be there competing. I think at some point the rounds will be live streamed, so if you're at all curious, be on the lookout for that. After that, for us interns, we will be having our end of semester event May 6th on Tuesday about just talking about higher education and all the fun drama that's around that. But before, that's all from me. Before we get into the topic, AJ, do you want to give just a short, intro to yourself? Where you're from, what's your major, just basic stuff.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm AJ. I'm 19 and a freshman here at the U of A. I'm pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Medicine and a Bachelor's of Arts in Philosophy. I'm from Yuma, Arizona.
All right.
Any
awesome.
pets?
I
Siblings?
I have a little sibling.
Okay.
He's 16 right now. Hi, Aviv, if you're watching this. Pets. I had a little pug, but we had to give her over to the neighbor.
Okay, I see.
This is very important.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'm just establishing a baseline, guys.
Okay. Federal government. With that all being said, why don't you take it away?
Say less. I love to take it away. So today's topic, I wanted to pick something. I had 3 basically ideas jumping around my brain, and I actually didn't settle on this until I was walking over from my meeting with Ted and Peyton. Shout out Ted and Peyton, because you forgot to shout out Peyton.
Shout out Peyton.
Intro.
This is the first time I've been on the podcast without him.
Wow, tisk.
There's a bit of a hole in here.
He has separation anxiety. It's really bad.
I left my water bottle over here.
But yeah, I actually didn't decide on it until I was walking over here. So I feel like this is something that we can all disagree on, and I don't want it to, obviously we can tie it to the United States specifically, but this is more of it'll be more interesting, in my opinion, if we try to tie it broadly, philosophically, abstractly.
Oh boy.
Intuitively.
Shout
So
out Peyton.
what is patriotism?
Oh, okay.
We're just going to go around. Whoever wants to tackle this one first.
I'll give a broad definition, and then we can get more nitpicky. I'd say just having a sense of pride in where you live, the nation, whichever nation that might be, that represents you. But we can also get more into the micro level.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have pride in your community, your neighborhood, your city. So there's definitely levels to it. But I'd say pride is a pretty major portion of it.
I'd be inclined to agree. I think patriotism is the natural tendency of people to have some sort of pride or sense of belonging to their nation. I think that the distinction between patriotism and nationalism, for example, is that patriotism is a sentiment, but it is still a reasonable one that does not extend into fervor. Meanwhile, nationalism tends to go towards the more extreme aspects of patriotism.
I would agree, but I would also say that for me, patriotism would be also having a love for your country, willing to fight for it, fight with it, like this.
Yeah, that was
or against it.
Yeah,
Or against it.
or against it. That's true. Jumping the gun to another question is the fighting against it, and you jumped the gun to my next question actually, which was what's the difference between patriotism and nationalism? So if either of you two have any notes to add on what AJ said, which is basically nationalism is the more extremist tendencies of patriotism.
Yeah, I think nationalism maybe is more accurately the actions of patriotism. Like you said, patriotism is more of a sentiment, but nationalism is you could see it in the forms of like policy, in the forms of like government actions, rhetoric, whereas patriotism again is more of a feeling, I would say.
I would say nationalism is more of an idea of superiority, where your love and pride in your country becomes the idea that you are now superior to everybody else who is not of that nationality. So that's what I think when I hear nationalism.
Yeah.
Which is where nationalism leads into imperialism very often.
So the nationalism for me is like about people specifically. It's about a pride in a people, whereas patriotism is a pride in a country or an idea. I feel like lots of patriots, they aren't necessarily loyal to their government, but they're loyal to the ideas that founded that government or ideas that they think underlie that government.
Yeah.
If that's fair to say. So with all that said, do we think that patriotism is an inherently right-wing idea or inherently conservative idea? Because I know we, do you think it's possible to be like leftist and be patriotic? Or do you think that with patriotism comes kind of like a chauvinism or like a right-wing undercarry?
Under my definition, I think you can be kind of more left and still be a patriot, because for me, I think if you're loyal to the ideas that founded your country, you're willing to fight even against your own government when the ideas don't like align anymore. So I do think there's an element of being left in inherently what patriotism should be, because if I love my country and my people, if you are ruining it, or I think that you are not aligned with our values anymore, I'm willing to stand up and shout in the streets that this is not what we stand for.
So you don't think that patriotism is, you don't think that questioning your government or criticizing your government is necessarily like against being patriotic?
No, I think it's the essence of the foundation of patriotism.
I think we have a disagreement on like fighting for your country, but everything else I largely agree on.
What do you mean by?
Okay, so this is, I do not have convictions strong enough to say that I'm willing to die for my country. Like,
there's a difference between dying for your country and dying for your government, though.
Okay, like both, though.
Really?
Yeah. Like,
okay, let's say unnamed country invades Montana right now. And it's like, are you going to fight for your community? Or are you just like, I would rather be part of unnamed country?
I would bunker down and just isolate myself.
Dang.
If I'm in a position where I have to die for something,
you're unpatriotic.
So are you a pacifist, or are you saying
I'm selfish?
Coward.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you a pacifist or are you just a coward?
Yeah, I was going to say coward.
Well, I prefer selfish because, like, if I have to die for something, that means I don't get to enjoy the effects of me dying for that something, and that's just not very appealing to me.
That is very selfish.
That's very selfish.
That is that's a very American opinion in mine. That's the way I see
selfish.
But as far to your question, though, like, no, I don't think patriotism is exclusive to left or right.
Okay.
I think talking more about our country, there's a stronger correlation with the right, but that is due to various factors that it doesn't necessarily like causation.
AJ has an opinion.
Yes, I do. I think if you take the terms back to their origin, which is with the French Revolution, right, the conservatives and the nationalists more broadly sat on the right side of the aisle, so we call it the right wing, and the more globalist revolutionary reformist types sat on the left, the atheists, really. And I think that nationalism is an inherently right-wing thing, while globalism is an inherent left-wing thing. But patriotism, a love for one's country, does not have to ascribe itself to any one political ideology. Because even if you are a left-winger in the United States, unless, at least in my view, you are among the radical fringes that believes that the United States is an inherently evil place, you still love your country. You simply disagree with the direction that it is being taken at the current moment.
Yeah, I can agree with that because, like, obviously, you know, whether it's for us on the left now, for those on the right 4 years ago, you know, there are many parts of the government I disagree with, but, like, I also still don't mind living here.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's interesting that you brought up globalism because that was another one of the points I wanted to talk about. I would say your analysis of the French Revolution is mostly correct, but I don't want to get bogged down in correcting your minor details.
You're the expert in French politics here.
Studied abroad.
I studied abroad, but
You should see yourself out for that joke, honestly. Anyways, back to the topic at hand.
Anyways,
Cut that out.
Globalism. So I have two questions here. One, how do we think globalization has impacted, or how does it affect patriotism? And two, because you say that you think globalism is more of like an inherently left-wing ideology where nationalism is right-wing, is globalism really a factor of an ideology, or is it an inevitable occurrence based on technological progress?
Going more on like the technological standpoint, because we just have an ability to communicate with everyone in the world.
We're going to do it.
Largely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it probably is inedible. Inedible.
Inedible.
You can't eat it. Inevitable. What was the first part of your question, though?
My first part was, how has globalization impacted patriotism?
Oh.
Poorly.
Honestly, kind of, yeah. Because, like, this is also a phenomenon in, like, congressional districts. We tend to view other representatives in a better light than our own. So I think in the same way, a lot of us have tendencies to view other countries in a light that is way more positive than our own. So I'd say it's probably negatively affected patriotism.
I would say it's negatively affected patriotism, but for a different reason. I think that as you globalize more, you're tending to shift more towards the extremes. As you globalize, there will be a certain subset of people who become more nationalist, more entrenched against the idea of globalism, because the common arguments are, for example, that it brings in cultures that are not homogenous with our own and aren't conducive to our flourishing. I think that it's going to bring another subset of people towards globalism and kind of just embracing the free, no borders, kumbaya sentiment that we're all people on the earth and therefore we should all coexist in harmony. So I think patriotism through globalism dissolves itself, but it doesn't necessarily go one way or the other. It goes both.
Yeah.
I would kind of disagree with both of you.
Oh, boy.
I don't think that patriotism has been negatively affected by globalization or globalism in of itself. I think people we are our own biggest critics, and that's been since the dawn of time. I think people are now more aware of how their actions or inactions affect others in a sense, and so they're criticizing with a sense of like awareness. They're more conscious of what they're criticizing. So because they're more conscious of their actions, it seems that they're being less patriotic, but I don't think they are. I don't think the average American, average person in any other country is hating their country unless they really do have strong sentiments to feel so. I think they're just criticizing. Criticizing and patriotism, again, like I said before, can go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. What was the question outside of how it affects patriotism?
The question was, well, to sum up, is globalism inevitable or is globalization inevitable?
I think inevitable is looking at it on too far of a timescale. I think that 50 years ago, we would not have thought that Google was a thing or that AI was a thing or that any of the things that we now take for granted were possible. But I think that in the foreseeable future, globalism, the way I see it, is in recession almost. I think that nations have borders, and not only physical borders, but cultural borders. I think America is almost the one country or one of a very select few countries that embraces the idea of the globalist melting pot ethic. I think most other countries in the world are strongly opposed to that, especially in the less like Western Europe, Euro-American-centric liberal ideal.
I agree with that. I think America is kind of like a sort of condensed version of a sort like the entire world because we do have like a dominant race, a dominant culture, but we also have like a lot of individual like variety of cultures to go along with that. So I probably agree.
You think that we're uniquely situated in the world in this way?
In scale, I would say yes, but like as on principle, maybe not.
I disagree with both of you again.
That's going to be a common theme, it feels like.
Yeah. I do agree on the point that I think America is different because, your history is different. The way you guys came about is very different than the rest of the other countries in the world, in the sense that you cannot help but be a melting point of cultures.
Yeah.
It is the very essence of which you were founded. If you go back on that, then there is no America. But I do disagree that other countries are, how do I say this, closed off.
Yeah.
I think globalization, in some sense, might be inevitable.
Well,
and I want to hesitate on that inevitable because I can't predict the future. But
I mean,
the trend is that we've come so far from the 1200s, and even then, people have always migrated, and there's always different cultures. And even in my country, there's over 250 different cultures. We're not homogeneous. Neither is the Western Europe that you're talking about. They're not homogeneous, not at least not 100%. And nobody can help but the spread of people all across the globe.
I mean, if you look at the world, it seems like we're more interconnected than ever before.
Absolutely.
And there's things you can point to, like maybe social media has actually made us more fundamentally distant from one another, and maybe this closeness is farcical. But still, I can take a plane, and in 8 hours, I can be in a different continent.
Yeah.
And I can talk to someone from across the world that I couldn't have talked to before. So in that way, I think we're more interconnected, and I can't foresee that just suddenly not being the case anymore.
Definitely, yeah.
Even with like restrictions on the internet or restrictions on flying like we had during COVID, like the world was still a very globalized place, even though the world was locked down. Also, the United States is not unique in being in such a melting pot. I mean, China has hundreds of cultures. Russia has hundreds of cultures.
So does mine.
Yeah.
And the entire continent that I'm from.
Thousands of cultures in the continent of Africa and thousands of languages. It's the same basically all over the world. It's just that we tend to view the United States as this like shining beacon of liberalism and multiculturalism without
the shining city on a hill.
Yeah, without considering the fact that
Where does that stem from?
probably the founding ideals, I would say, and like Blossom said, it's from our history. We were founded in a very unique way, and the ideals that we were founded on were very radical, and they still are. That's where patriotism for me comes from, because I consider myself to be very patriotic, but it's more in a sense of, I think that if we followed the American ideals, we would be the most progressive nation on the planet. If you just looked at what was written down at the beginning or the ideals that we fought for at the beginning of the nation.
Well, I think I want to take it back about 30 seconds because I want to almost make a distinction. I think that when you're talking about globalism, you're talking about communication and being able to travel places. I think that's globalism in kind of lowercase p politics, right?
What do you think globalism is?
I would say it is almost the homogenization of nations to become one almost United Nations, but further style of world government. I would say that globalism, in the way that you're speaking about it, is perfectly fine, but I think that it's impractical at a uppercase P politics governmental level to expect that we are all going to become kumbaya with cultures that are not our own within the foreseeable future.
I think
have a question.
Yes.
Do you wanna-
Go ahead.
Okay. What do you mean homogeneous? Do you think that when people integrate into a culture, they automatically become one and the same? Because I don't understand why homogeny is coming into globalization. I mean, I just don't see how those two things can sit side by side. I think they contradict each other. But
if I could jump in real quick, I think that the way that you're viewing globalism is kind of like unilateral globalization.
Right.
What
yes.
I would describe as universalism, where it's like
Okay.
we're all going to there is this one truth, and it's not really multiculturalism at that point, because you're not saying like we can all have our own cultures. It's saying like we have to be this monocultural one world government, and that's not what globalism is to me. Globalism to me is saying that like, you can go anywhere in the world, meet anyone in the world, and it's okay. Basically.
Okay, yeah, I think we're just operating off two different definitions of
definitions.
globalism.
Yeah.
I also think it's like having different cultures exist in the same place at the
Yes,
same
yeah.
time. That's
Yeah,
global.
I think under your definition of globalism, then yeah, I would agree. Probably it is inevitable.
Yeah.
We're just kind of looking at it differently.
Yeah, like in the United States, for example, because I feel like that's what you two are most readily available to talk about. Is that we've had all these cultures here, and it's not like they're just. When we talked about what does it mean to be American, for example, I know you weren't here for that, but if you look at the massive cultures within the United States, It's not like you go from neighborhood to neighborhood and everyone looks the same, talks the same, dresses the same, believes the same things. It's different everywhere, and I would say it's the same for many places.
Yeah, that's why I was saying the U.S. is kind of like a microcosm of like globalization all over the earth, because we have different states with borders, and each state has its own kind of dominant culture.
I would say I would go further than that.
Really?
I mean, even on the state level, I mean, like we have reservations, and even then, if you just take out the thought of government, like borders. I mean, you can look at cultures without looking at the governmental borders, and we have so many like, micro cultures all over the United States.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. All right, glad that we all agree with that. So would we agree that patriotism is a love for one's country?
Generally, I think, yeah.
Okay, and like your idea of that country is different for every person. Do you think that a love of one's country is necessary for unity?
Right now, yes, but that might not be the case in some.
I see you've taken on Peyton's habit of giving me useless answers that don't mean anything. Thank you for that, Logan.
I gotta fill the voids. Okay.
I would say yes, but also maybe not.
Here's like the way I see it. Like, obviously, it's impossible to predict and hard to even think of. But there is the possibility that like world governments, politics, they all just kind of collapse. And from there, we are united as people, not as like individual polities that are just kind of floating around on the planet.
Okay. Anybody else have something I can do?
Something you can actually work with?
Yeah.
I think that there has to be a very clear distinction here. Love of one's country is absolutely essential for unity. Love of the present state of one's country is not, right? Like we were talking about earlier, love of the principles of the United States, our founding ideas, our founding documents is necessary for the unity and prosperity of the United States. But love of whatever the president that's in charge or the Supreme Court or any of the day-to-day workings of the country isn't really necessary, right? You and I probably disagree politically on more than anybody else on the entire debate team, and yet we will both call ourselves patriots because we both love our nation, even if we disagree fundamentally
on what that nation is.
On what that nation is and the direction it should be taken.
Yeah,
I'll push back a little bit. I think you do have to take into account the current state, because like let's look at America today. The current state of the country is something that we are very divided on, and we're not very unified. So I think you can't just kind of hand wave that away.
Any thoughts?
I was thinking, because
it's a dangerous habit.
And I don't know if I can agree 100%. I do think that the love of your country is necessary for unity in some sense. Yes. Like, because patriotism is absolutely necessary for you to fight for whatever revolution that your country might need. I just think the amount of people who have that love must exceed those that don't. Because I think that there's always going to be apathy. There are going to be those that say, like I don't care. Those that say, I'm too selfish to fight. Oh.
Damn.
We cannot exclude those people from like the limits of their love. They might love, but not as much as the others.
Yeah.
So I do think it's necessary, but it just means that those who love and are willing to fight must exceed those who are selfish.
Let me ask you maybe a question you'll find more interesting then. Do you think that unity is necessary for a country to be run? Do you think that countries need unity?
What do you mean by?
Well, if we
define run,
define unity,
like so, when we say that, to some extent, you need to love your country for there to be stability, I guess is a better way of putting it. Then what if we say maybe there shouldn't be stability? Maybe we would make more progress as a nation, as a people, if we said, why are we working towards stability right now when what we need is chaos?
Anarchy.
Not necessarily anarchy, but maybe periods of instability. Because if we all agree, or like, this country is a mess right now, or whatever country is a mess, whatever government is a mess right now, then is it really best to say, okay, but we love this country, so let's stick to the plan, guys. Let's just follow through. Let's say stable, or let's just say, why do we don't agree with the government?
That's what you're saying. If you think unity is agreement, then I would have to like keep quiet because I don't think unity is agreement.
What do you think unity is?
I think unity is being able to look past one's differences
Mm-hmm.
and work towards a common goal. Or being able to like identify something together, regardless of your background. Like you and AJ can identify something and say, that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And I disagree on how to get there,
Yeah.
but still try to work to get there.
In my mind, in many cases, that would mean patriotism fosters disunity rather than unity.
I think patriotism fosters discussions that may,
Discourse.
yeah.
I actually
He said the word.
I agree with Robert to an extent that patriotism might create more division because I think, like, especially in political conversations, we agree on like principles. We just disagree on how to act.
Yeah.
And so if you have two people that love their country and have those strong principles, they just vehemently disagree on what to do with those principles. I think that can represent a lot
the
of our
fundamental
political
difference
divide.
between a left-wing populist and a right-wing populist is they both love their country. They just disagree what that country looks like.
Sure, yeah.
I would say there must be, like you were saying something about maybe we need chaos. I think that it's integral that we have periods of instability for a country to grow. We cannot just be like this all the time. Your country would never progress. But at the same time, I don't think that patriotism is, dividing people too much.
You don't think it's divisive inherently?
Because I think you need compromise. No matter what you're doing, like once you talk about it, like
Compromise?
I disagree, you disagree. Let's find a way.
Let's find a middle ground.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go on.
Real quick, I'd like to disagree with one thing, which is the idea that politics in the modern day, at least in America, is fundamentally about we have kind of the same premises, but we disagree on how to solve the problem. I think that in the case of right-wing populism, that's absolutely true. But I think, and not to debate any of these really issues, but on the abortion issue, on the transgenderism issue, on issues such as those that are really of the social manner, it's not that right-wing and left-wing people disagree on kind of what the problem is and we just don't agree on how to solve it. We just disagree on what the problem fundamentally is, and I think that ignoring that is to everyone's own peril.
Yeah, but I feel like in a way it's like we can distill the problems that we have in a nation down to like, okay, we disagree on the solutions for America's woes. Like,
Okay.
when I say something like that, it's more like, say like a right-wing populist or someone who's more conservative will say something about stricter immigration controls, right?
Right.
And that's a social issue and an economic issue. So maybe that's fair.
That's fair, yeah.
But then someone on the left will say like, well, immigrants aren't the problem, or immigration isn't necessarily the problem, or even illegal immigrants aren't necessarily the problem. The problem is how we treat them when they get here. And so they're still disagreeing both on the problem and they're disagreeing on how to solve like a more fundamental issue, which is the nature of immigration in general.
Yeah, and when
That's
you,
what I think too.
when you boil it down, like policy is how you solve an
Yes,
issue.
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I feel like at the end of the day, like the abortion is an issue that every American knows is being discussed. And so they do disagree on how to solve that. Because if you're more on the left, maybe you think that, we should have, more autonomy to women. And if you're on the right, maybe you think, well, we should protect unborn children more. That's a way I phrased it so that both sides will be happy.
Yes.
And happy. But at the end of the day, they're both still disagreeing on, they both agree abortion is the problem there. Abortion is the central issue, but they're just disagreeing on how to solve that. And you could say that for literally any problem. That's just how politics works.
Sure.
But yeah. So do we think patriotism, yes, no, good, bad? I know you don't seem as patriotic as these three right here.
I can't say I am.
Do you think that patriotism should be taught in schools?
I have a fun personal anecdote for this. In third grade, I had a teacher that was very, very patriotic, and she kind of instilled that in us.
Apparently not well enough.
Apparently, it did not last.
Did not stick.
But I guess I'd probably be neutral to that. I mean, if if schools want to have that, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. If schools want to ban that, I don't necessarily have a
This is
problem
just
with
me
that.
trying to tie it into our discourse theme for the semester.
Higher education.
Higher education.
Sure. Well, yeah, I guess in higher education, I mean, that's hard to do because you're not
Because
necessarily
you're questioning everything, right?
that, and you're teaching to students that maybe not are not necessarily in the country,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
There's international students. There's students that might be going abroad.
So do you think that students, like international students or immigrants, let's tie this back into that, do you think that they should be patriots for whatever country they're immigrating to? Or do you think that that country has to earn that patriotism?
I would agree with that second point, because if we're talking about like political refugees, they maybe don't have a choice to immigrate. They might be just like forced out.
Yeah.
So does that mean that they have to love the country?
What
that
about
they-
ones that aren't forced out? And this is open to you too as well.
sure.
I'm not even gonna. This is like a global issue, not an American issue. So
Okay. If they're not forced to, I mean, I can't justify trying to force someone to love where they live.
like, do we, for you two, since it's just been me and Luke for a little
I've
bit,
been yapping.
You're good.
when you immigrate to another country, whatever country, do you think that part of that immigration process should be showing that you have some kind of patriotism, some kind of liking for that country?
I mean, I think yes. I think, as with the distinction between patriotism and loving one's country and loving the current state of that country, I think if you come here to the United States, if you come to any country, you should love that country, or you should at least like the country. You should have an understanding of the founding ideals, a basic glossing at least of its history, and you should understand that by moving here, you are inherently saying that, yes, I like the ideals of this country, even if I may not like its exact political state at the moment. I think it's a bit of a different story for refugees, right? If you really don't have a choice where you're moving, I think you should learn to love that country if you're planning to stay there. But I don't think that comes as a prerequisite of moving to that country, because you're fleeing war. You're not just coming there on basically, a touristic immigration.
Yeah. Blossom.
Oh, this is going to be a very long reply.
I'm so ready.
We have time.
Okay.
I can't tell if you're being
going to-
sarcastic. Or,
No, I'm
okay.
actually being serious. I'm going to reply your first question, which was, do you think it should be taught in schools? And I'm going to go back to my own experience from where I'm from. And we were never really taught patriotism. We had civic education. And civic education was just telling you your duties, what the country should do for you, the government. We're learning about, our own history as written by, the people who came before us, to put it lightly. So we were learning about their version of a history, but also because we were still, our culture is very tight-knit, I would say. Different cultures within my country pass down their history too. So we learn this version of history in school, underline the tones that we learn from our communities. And then we try to match them up in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And then we learn what our duties was to our country and what the government's duties should be for us. And then we learn the values and principles of any good citizen. But then we
Bless
learn,
you.
bless you.
Thank you.
But then we learn also what our values and duties should be from our parents and from those around us and the extended family members. And I think by living every day in your lived experiences, joining all of these different things together, you can't help but like where you live.
Mhm.
You can't help but like the people around you. You can't help but hope for the best for you and the people that look like you and go to the same school as you. And I don't think patriotism should be taught or handed down to people.
It should be experienced.
I think it should be experienced, exactly.
That's a good answer.
No, go ahead.
Then the second part of my answer to if you're emigrating to a country or immigrating to a country, should you love the country? I think it's a privilege to think that most people have the choice to really sit down,
Mm-hmm.
read up on the founding principles of that country. I think most people who leave a place are running from something.
Yeah.
Whether they're alive, whether it be a chase of a better dream, whether it be a future that they see, I think most people are chasing something. And most people are running to the first chance they get to experience that dream. Whether it be the American dream, French, European, African, whatever it is, people are chasing a dream. I don't think dreams should be forced upon people or taken away from people based on what other people think your dream should be. So that's where I kind of slightly disagree, is that I think that when you come to a country, you begin to experience it in a real way. And that's going to tell you whether you love that place or not. The people will tell you whether they love that place. The person you meet at the immigration border is going to tell you. For me, it was when I came to Tucson Airport, and I did not know anybody. Nobody came to pick me up at the airport, even though they were supposed to. So
I would have.
So who do I go to? Who do I turn to? Most people would have been like, "You did what?"
Yeah.
I ran to the first 6'5" policeman that I saw.
Oh God. I'm glad you're still here.
That's
But the
crazy.
thing is, he was really nice to me. He just pointed me in the right direction. And that was it.
Yeah.
There were so many people in this country that have showed me a sense of belonging. I cannot say the same if someone else did, for someone else who did not experience that. There are also so many people who have shown me a sense of you do not belong here. And it depends on which is stronger for you. So there is a sense that you can like a place, you can chase a dream from a place. Every one of us who comes to study in a country is chasing a dream. We're chasing our own, we're chasing dreams for our family, chasing dreams for yourself, chasing dreams of a career. And when you come to that country, you begin to experience that dream. And so I don't know if that experience makes you love the place or not, but I cannot force it upon you.
I think
Or make it a requirement.
kind of to go off on that, if we expect someone to have a love for where they are, I would be more partial to the community level than I would the wider the country level. Okay. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I think I want to take back about 3-4 minutes maybe.
AJ has thoughts.
Yes. I have strong thoughts on basically everything, as you know.
Okay.
I think that, yes, you absolutely should experience patriotism in the context of should we teach it in schools or not, but I think that doesn't quite go far enough. I think that by virtue of a proper civic education, you should be taught to love your country. You should be taught to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. You should be taught that your country, although not perfect, is good, right? The idea that schools, a place of education, have little to no place to educate you on the virtues of your nation and on the pride that you should have, the patriotism that you should have for your nation, I think doesn't really fit with the American ideal as I see it.
Can I jump in first?
Okay.
I apologize. I think that's a little contradictory when it comes to civics education. For a lot of people, the more, and I'm going to root this in America, for a lot of people, the more you learn about American history, the less you actually end up kind of liking the country, because you realize wow, we've done some pretty wild things. So I think to mandate, but not actually mandate, it's just as a matter of speaking, a love for your country in education, I think that's a little contradictory.
Real quick before you respond, not to make it seem like we're dogpiling.
No, go ahead.
I actually, I agree with Blossom entirely that patriotism should be experienced and not taught. Civic education means teaching history. It means teaching, yes, what do we think the ideals of our country are? What do we think, what do we want to espouse? And if you end up, in my opinion, trying to teach patriotism, trying to teach someone that your country is good rather than teaching them what the country is, what it has been historically, if you assign moral judgments to it, what happens if your experience is different? My experience of this country has not been great. If someone tried to teach me from the beginning that this country is great, it would make me the opposite of patriotic.
Well, I think that it comes back to what the purpose of education is, right? It isn't just to teach you math, science, arithmetic, and history. It is to impart, to some extent at least, moral virtues. And part of that education does fall to the parents and to the community, but I think it also falls upon any formal education system to foster that sense of love for nation, love for one's people. I think that when it comes to the United States, yes, absolutely, you should acknowledge the flaws in our history, you should acknowledge slavery, but you should also acknowledge we were one of the first nations to abolish it, right? You should absolutely acknowledge racial discrimination. You should also acknowledge at the same time that we are one of the least racially discriminatory nations on planet Earth, right? I think that if you look at the pros and the cons of America, you will end up, whether intentionally or not, teaching patriotism.
Well-
I think I'm going to respond quickly to that. It's this idea that I don't like, that I hear all the time, and it has to do when they teach history in America, that these people have this connotation that when you teach history in America, you're dividing the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why. Like I said, we were taught civic education through one lens. Not just one lens, but we also obviously expanded on it. I said we taught the duties of the people to the government and the duties of the government to the people. We examined our history, post-colonialism, pre-colonialism, and my family taught us what has been handed down to us generationally from our individual cultures, because we're different people entirely. So in America, I assume it should be the same. When you teach civic education, it should be the duties of the government to the people, duties of the people to the government, what has been done throughout history.
The social contract.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
What has been throughout history, what you guys have done, what else has been done to you. Now, whether it's bad or good, I think morality is a separate thing too.
Yes.
I do think that morality is taught to you in general throughout your life. The day you're born until the day you whatever consciousness hits you, morality is being shown to you. It's being taught to you. It inherently. Mm-hmm. You hear it, you see it. When you hear, oh, we raided this place and we killed 2,000 people, you're like, that doesn't seem okay.
Sound right.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. Why? Because morality is shown to you all around the world, unless you come in some kind of cult where they teach you something else, in which case I'm very sorry. So I would disagree that civic education would make you disloyal to your country. In fact, I think you should say, damn, America or my country has really done a lot, but I still stand by the founding values, and I'm sorry that we did this. How can we be better?
Ideally, civil education should make you more patriotic, not by exposing you to your country's greatness, but exposing you to your country's faults and how, despite all that, we've made progress. And I'd like to say two more things real quick, and then you can respond. First of all, about the history, I just want to correct a little historical inaccuracy. We were not one of the first to abolish slavery. We were one of the last. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, it seemed to me, you said that one of the duties of education should be to teach morality.
Yes.
It seems to me like you're conflating morality and virtue with patriotism. Do you think that they're connected?
I think that patriotism is an inherent virtue. I think that the level of patriotism changes depending on a country's greatness, its history, and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that patriotism is a virtue. I think that the idea that we were one of the last nations to abolish slavery, frankly, is historically preposterous in my eyes, due solely to the fact that there are dozens of nations across Europe that still actively practice slavery, China being one of them, with the Uyghur Muslim internment camps. So if you want to say in the context of Western civilization, Western Europe, one of the last, then yes.
In
but in
2024, if we're gonna get that nitty gritty on slavery, in 2024 on the California ballot, the Californians voted to quote keep slavery. So yeah, I mean. If we really want to distill it down to that level, then no, we haven't abolished slavery. But I feel like that's not.
I'm sorry. That reminds me of the law that was banning lynching on the federal level. A lynching hasn't happened in the country in 200 years.
Well, the slavery was in regards to.
It's actually wrong.
Yeah, the slavery was in California. It was in regards to their prison program, where they make. They make the prisoners work as firefighters against the California wildfires for cents. Which is slavery.
Yeah. I think my general opinion, and keep in mind this is coming from someone that's very selfish when it comes to patriotism.
We know.
I don't see a need to teach a love for one's country in a school, whether it's your just general education, moral education, whatever. So this is one of the few aspects that I have sort of a utopian vision. I don't see why we should have such loyalty to arbitrarily drawn borders and arbitrary governments that are thousands of miles away from us. So that's the one thing I'm just why? Which is ironic.
Your idea of government interests me. Yeah. We have to talk more about this sometime.
I think if education teaches someone or conditions you to think a certain way, you have not received education. What you have received is you've been brainwashed.
Hold on? Can I push back a little bit on that? I think if patriotism is a byproduct of your education, like that's okay.
Yeah.
But like setting out to intentionally
tell you
teach
that this is
someone-
good, this
yes.
is bad.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
I think that I can kind of sum up my argument with a pithy little quote that doesn't perfectly apply, but it kind of sums up what I'm saying. The difference between education and indoctrination is whether or not you agree with the values being taught, right? The difference between the Soviet Union indoctrinating or propagandizing their population against the United States and the United States educating a population on the downfalls of the Soviet Union is whether you agree that the Soviet Union was bad or not.
Here's the thing. You wouldn't run into an issue of indoctrination if you're not teaching things to be inherently or universally or objectively good or bad. If we say education should teach kids the basics of reading, writing, math, etc., and then education should teach kids to think openly and think innovatively, you're not indoctrinating them because you're teaching them to think for themselves.
Can we from there jump to higher education, because I think that's
Yes.
a big difference.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Because I know, and this is coming from like a center left person, I have professors that are very, very, very left, and it is like almost painfully obvious, not quite to the extent of like I'm like nervous to attend lectures, but like it is apparent.
Can I say that it's not indoctrination because the point of university is to be exposed to different ideas
Sure.
as an adult.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily trying to frame it as indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like
They're supposed to be there because you have professors that are exactly the opposite, right? And we
Sure.
have people on campus that are exactly the opposite.
Sure.
At Garimella's, I don't even know what they call that.
Inauguration.
Inauguration,
Yeah, sure.
induction.
Yeah, you saw that there was a bunch of mostly left protesters there, but then at the same time we have like those right-wing protesters on campus talking about like things I'm not going to say out loud because it's kind of disgusting, but every day out there on the mall. So
yes, yeah.
I mean, like to me, that's the point. I feel like at the earlier stages of education, you should be being taught that you'll be exposed to different ideas and to think for yourselves. And then when you get to university, hopefully you have the tools to discern. Also, I think if you go to university, you're 18 years old, usually. You go to university with thinking that you know everything, that you have all the right political opinions. If you come out 22, 23 years old, still believing the same things, I feel like you missed something critically.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't. I think the purpose of higher education is not to solely teach you things or present to you viewpoints that you have not yet encountered. I think the purpose of university and higher education also isn't to, teach you nothing but engineering so you can go work in the widget factory for Mr. McGillicuddy, right? I think that the purpose of university is to teach you the liberal arts so that you can better make sense of your freedom. I think that that's traditionally what, before about the Cold War era, we kind of all believed in the United States. And I think it is, I don't think that the idea that there is an equality between left-wing professors and right-wing professors is entirely true. I haven't looked at the numbers for the University of Arizona, but I've looked at them for Ivy League schools, University of California system schools, and the ratio of Democrat registered voters as professors and Republican registered voters as professors is something like 7-1 at the best. So I don't think the idea that you're being equally exposed to all of these ideas is quite accurate.
I think that says something
Maybe
about the
Republicans who aren't becoming professors.
Yeah, I think that says something more about like who is positioning themselves to think the way that Ivy League schools are wanting, and by that I mean specifically opening yourselves up to more disagreement.
I will agree with both of you. I think there is a saturation of left-wing voices on college campuses, but I won't necessarily say that like right-wing voices are completely exculpated.
I feel like we should, because ultimately it's the bureaucracy who's handling the hiring choices, and the bureaucracy for shout out Arizona Board of Regents. I'm so sorry, but the ideology of them is inherently and explicitly right-wing. There's not a single person on the Arizona Board of Regents who is a registered Democrat. So
we know that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that comes down also to the difference between the kind of board and the administrative class and how they tend to run things, and the professors, because if you look at, and this is boiling down Republican versus Democrat politics to a very, very base level, I'm sorry, but left-wing people tend to be more idealists, right? Which is what a professorial job is meant to do. You are looking, whether you're in the sciences for research or in the kind of philosophy liberal arts department, at the ideal world. While in the managerial kind of class, you're dealing with kind of the upfront facts, the brutal facts of reality, and mitigating them as best you can.
And I will say that you do get exposed equally to different ideas, and it's not just through the professors. The professors may have the more authoritative positions, but say you come from a small town in Montana all the way down to Tucson, Arizona, and suddenly you're exposed, you went from being exposed to the same community for your entire life to being exposed to completely new norms, completely new ideas, completely new people that you've never met. And that's the function of university.
That's very true. Although I'm curious what it would be for like someone who lives in an urban area that is traditionally more democratic, like if they would feel that change.
Well,
for me,
yes.
You think so? Because like I'll ground it for me personally, like the change gave me whiplash because my community was like conservative through and through. Like there was just like there's hardly any diversity. There's hardly any like different opinions. Like all my friends were conservative. So coming here, that was a massive shock.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that would necessarily be the same for someone who grew up in a traditionally liberal community.
Well, I think it's going to be nearly the same. It's still a university campus at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
The
thing that you're not keeping in mind is despite the University of Arizona being situated in Tucson, most of the people who go there aren't from Tucson. And it's the same with many universities, is that you're going to be exposed to a bunch of different people because they're not from Tucson. I was born and raised in Tucson. I went to a very famously very liberal high school. And then even then, when I got to university, it's like kind of like the politics you're exposed to in high school for the most part is very like puddle deep. And then you get to university, and that's where your ideas get expanded. That's where you can see a multiplicity of viewpoints, and then that's where you can really delve into your ideas. That's why I say, if you go into university, yes, absolutely, you should go in there with your viewpoints, your ideas. You should be open to changing them, though. And that doesn't mean that like you graduate and suddenly you've flipped sides entirely, but your side maybe has more nuance. Maybe you know more than you went in knowing.
Well, I think just reflecting on my personal experiences, I'm from Yuma, Arizona. We are culturally a kind of center-right town. We have a lot of farmers, a lot of industrial workers, a lot of blue-collar, and that tends to shift towards the Republican end. But when we actually go to vote for the presidential elections or anything like that, we tend to vote blue. It's a bit of a weird conundrum. So it's a very centrist in nature town. And then I came to the U of A, and I was shocked at how, frankly, radically left-wing some of my professors were. You heard, like, I remember going into class for one of my classes. I won't name it for obvious reasons, but we were talking very, very openly and in a very positive way about transgenderism, and we were talking about the historic evils of the medical system against basically everybody except white men. And I was like, hold up, what?
Well, is that leftism or is that just a historical fact in the United
That's
States?
very much leftism.
Okay.
I would argue.
That is a fact, because you cannot study, as someone who is in the science field, you cannot study American history when it comes to medicine without looking at all the things that they've done that are wrong. And just saying the things that they've done that are wrong does not mean that you are not calling them evil perpetrators or like damning the entire system. We're just simply studying facts. You cannot study good facts without studying bad facts.
That's fair.
That's it.
My bad, I wouldn't specify enough. We were talking about that in the context of how supposedly the system is still systemically racist against black people because of health outcomes in the medical system, which frankly the literature I don't believe supports. But it's less on the substantive points that we were talking about and more just the political bend of them, right? To me, as someone who is a very conservative person from a very centrist town, the exact opposite of everything I believe being taught was strange. It was cultural shock, like Logan was saying.
But it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you were exposed to those ideas.
Well, yeah, but I think that if I had not come into university already knowing what my kind of principles were, what my philosophy was, I very easily would have fallen into rabid left-wing dogma.
So when the university holds the campus conservative meetings in public every single week, or when Charlie Kirk is invited on our campus and he's here every semester and he holds meetings with like 1,000 or greater students, could you not say the same thing there?
Yeah, absolutely, you could. I'm saying if you're a left-wing person, you're probably going to notice a lot of the things that I noticed, vice versa. I'm not commenting on some sort of broader moral. I'm just saying, like, this was my experience coming into university.
And
I'd say I have a little problem with the example you gave about how the medical system is inherently or kind of racist to black people, and you're saying the literature doesn't support it. Can you expand on that?
Well, I remember one of the examples that they used was that black babies in the NICU have a higher survival rate if they are taken care of by a black doctor as opposed to a white doctor. But when you actually look at the study that was made and the several subsequent studies that have been made after that, you see that no, this isn't true because it doesn't account for the actual condition of the NICU infants. White doctors tended to take the more difficult, the more prone to death cases inherently for whatever reason. Like, I'm not trying to attribute some sort of value statement to that, but that is what was happening. The infants who were more likely to die were more likely to be taken on by white doctors. And so the data skewed one way while reality skewed the other. And that sort of lying with statistics, I think, is where we get a large percentage of the American system is racist perception.
All right, we're getting into a really complicated area, and we have beat the dead horse on the patriotism.
We are not talking about patriotism.
we don't
revisit the
mentioned
healthcare
the
system.
word patriotism in the last.
No.
I will say as a quick point that definitely you need to research the healthcare system more in general. It's not just about it being systemically racist. I will just say that there's a whole lot of problems with the healthcare system.
Oh, yeah, on that we can agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, well. The fact of the matter is, if you have a system that is mostly researched through and through by white men for hundreds of years, then they're not taking into consideration voices of other people. And if you don't have that, then you don't have a comprehensive healthcare system. Is basically what it boils down to.
Yeah.
For women and people of color. Yeah. All right.
All right.
Do you want to do the outro?
I will send us off. All right. Thank you guys all for watching. This is obviously a very engaging conversation. We appreciate AJ for being on with us and sharing his opinions.
Almost exactly an hour.
Sowing some disagreement. Hell yeah. Just a reminder, April 12th, that weekend is our Regents competition. May 6th is our end of semester debate. We don't quite know the time and place that we will be having that.
But for sure, us two will be on that panel.
Yes.
So check it out.
But we will get more details to you as we get closer. Other than that, I've been Logan.
I'm AJ.
Awesome.
I'm the mandate.
And Robert.
Robert.
Yeah. Thank you all for watching. See you next time.